Now back to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show, which is presented to you by Power Planter Earth Augers, the official digging tool to find the right size for your digging project. Visit powerplanter.com. Now here are your hosts, Joey and Holly Baird.
Welcome back to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show. Thank you for hanging around. We're going to talk about a problem that if you're not facing it, you will soon face it, and that's powdery mildew. We're going to go over what is it, how do you, what to identify it is, why it happens, and how one can at least combat or reduce the impact in which it has on the plants that it can devastate.
Powdery mildew is one of those diseases that you pretty much know when you have it. It
right.
looks like somebody came and sprinkled powder on your squash, your viney plants,
cucumber, watermelon,
pumpkins.
grapes, beans, peas. There's even flowers that are severely affected by the powdery mildew.
So it's easy to identify. You will know because they have those powdery spots.
If you think you got it, you probably have it.
Right. This is through spores that drift into your garden. And so what they do is they come through the wind or however they drift over, whether it be from your neighbor's yard or who knows from where. And they also can come from dormant spores that were in old vegetation or old weeds nearby. So here is a good reason to clean out any old vegetation. Maybe if you had powdery mildew in the past, make sure you throw that away. Don't compost it. Don't burn it. Throw it away.
Right. People are like, oh, compost, it'll get hot enough. The most backyards, unless you're in a tumbler that you can control the temperature, you're probably not going to have that core temperature warm up for the majority of gardeners. There are some that are very particular about the temperature in which the compost pile is, whether it's a tumbler or a pile. But you're not going to, it's better just to throw it out in the trash. And if your city doesn't allow that, put it in the bottom and then put some trash on top of it and then sandwich it in between some stuff. They're not going to notice.
Right. So it does thrive in warm, dry climates. So it requires a fairly high relative humidity, humidity around the plant itself. Not necessarily the daytime humidity, but if there's a lot of humidity around the plant. So about 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 to 27 degrees Celsius is when this is going to occur. But then once it gets warmer, higher than 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius, it seems to be slowing down by that.
There's a Goldilocks effect where everything's perfect and all these spores are starting to combine and they create the powdery mildew. Now, a couple of reasons why it may be more intensified in your garden could be because of the spacing of the plants. We always want to pack more into an area than probably what is required. We do the same thing. If it says you can put 4 in that area, we try to squeeze 5 in the area. And then the plants are overlapping one another. And then the wind takes the spores from plant 1 and affects the plants down the row because they're not social distanced properly. And then other things like bugs will take it, insects will walk across leaves and transfer that mildew onto the adjacent plants that wasn't infected.
So our plants need to social distance from communicable diseases and disorders.
Yeah, right? We don't have enough time in this show to talk about all that.
So you want to make sure you space.
And that's the other thing with growing, like for example, growing cucumbers, vining them on the ground versus vertically growing them. It exposes them more to the air and allows more visual inspection. In addition, it's easier to harvest, but you're able to see things quicker. Now, if you have plant 1 and you begin to see the developmental stages of powdery mildew, and plant 2, 3, and 4 has no infestation that you can tell, you can remove up to 25% of plant 1's limbs and leaves. However, you want to be sure you have a trash bag right there because those spores will get on your hand, they'll get in the wind. As you drag them across the garden, they can infect not only your other zucchini plants, but if you got peas next to them or cucumbers, you may be introducing that into those environments as well on those plants. So keep in mind that you can cut up to 25% of the foliage back on them, but you want to be cautious of how you remove it from the actual location where the plant is at in your garden.
Definitely. So there are some things you can do. One is you can water from overhead. This will help wash those spores off the leaves.
Now, people are like, whoa, that's what causes it. Well, that's kind of a myth where there's water laying on the leaves and it doesn't dry off in time. Now, this is not a 100% let's clean the leaves off with the overhead watering mechanism. It has some effect, but if you're going to do such in this manner, you would want to do it early in the morning, early in the afternoon, so the leaves don't go to bed wet. That can cause other issues if you have a bunch of, squash leaves or pumpkin leaves that are very moist and it gets dark and they don't have time to dry out. Now, obviously, when it rains, you have no control over that. We're trying to minimize the impact in which we have on the plants in which we're growing in our garden.
Right. So you can use a few different things. Now, there are some chemicals that you can purchase and use. Otherwise, you can mix 1 teaspoon of baking soda with 1 quart of water. So that's your ratio is 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 quart of water. And you spray the plants thoroughly, as the solution will only kill the fungus that it comes in contact with. So that's something that you can do.
Now, if you don't have if you go out in your garden this weekend and everything is just beautiful, wonderful, you can apply this mixture on the plant's leaves to be proactive instead of reactive, and that will at least you have a better chance, because what you're doing is you're cleaning the leaves off, you're changing the pH level on that leaf to allow that fungal or that powdery mildew not to develop. Just like in your bathroom, if you have air circulation and the right temperature, then mold doesn't grow in certain areas as if it was just stagnant, warm conditions in the corner of the tub type of example.
Right, and that's one thing to mention. If you've had this issue in the past, maybe you didn't know you had this issue, and now you do, and you didn't realize that, maybe you're going to have this issue again. Because
if you're a new gardener, you should at least do some image searches online to know what this is, because this can devastate your crops if you don't catch it in time or you're not aware of it.
Right, so you just maybe go ahead, look into it, and then make a proactive move. So vinegar is another solution. And you would take 2 to 3 tablespoons of vinegar. So this is a little bit of a more diluted solution. 2 to 3 tablespoons of vinegar. You can use a common apple cider vinegar and mix that with 1 gallon of water. You don't want to do too much because you don't want to be more is good, right? You want to keep it.
Don't spray your Green Gobbler 20% horticultural OMRI listed vinegar on it, because you're going to burn the plant.
Yeah, you don't want to burn your plant. So you want to do this, whether it be the baking soda or the vinegar, before you see any problems, and it's going to help you immensely.
So, and then now, that's just 2 different recipes in which you can go ahead and experiment with on your, not experiment, but be proactive instead of reactive. If you want to get a bunch of different recipes because you may not have a certain ingredient, you may have mouthwash instead of vinegar, whatever the case is, because that is another mixture in which you can make. You can search online, go to your favorite search engine and search powdery mildew, growing a greener world, or a powdery mildew Joe Lample, who is the host of the PBS program, Growing a Greener World. He's got a really good article that breaks this down and gives those home recipes for the mixtures in which will work. Now, does this, if you go ahead and see powdery mildew on your plants and you go and take the vinegar or the baking soda and spray out there, this does not mean that tomorrow the plant is happy and waving at you and everything's great. Sometimes it will slow the mildew down, but it doesn't eliminate it or remove it off the leaves. So
I think that's how you could use a combination of removing the leaves and also spraying this, and remove it from the leaves that look the worst or the most affected, and then spray it so that it helps kind of stop the problem. But definitely, if you're a new gardener or maybe you've had this issue before, I would do this beforehand. I would use the baking soda, I think, before I came with the vinegar.
And you want to spray the top of the leaves. You get a pump sprayer from Chapin. And if you're going to do the vinegar, they've got a vinegar sprayer that's designed. They've got industrial parts because vinegar will eat through anything. So you can do that with the Chapin vinegar sprayer. And you spray the top of the leaves. You spray the under the leaves. You soak that down because you want to disrupt that pH level on that leaf. And then it may be too late this year to utilize this information, but you don't want to have the cucumbers budded right up next to the zucchini, right up next to the watermelon, right up next to the peas, because all of those are susceptible to powdery mildew. Squashes, pumpkins, cucumbers, melons, the nightshade, tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, roses, legumes, peas can all be subject to being affected by powdery mildew in some form or fashion.
So the biggest thing is that you want to make sure that if you do get powdery mildew, that if you are going to remove some of the foliage, that you make sure you throw it away, you toss it right away. You don't drag it through your garden. And if you have maybe an area of your garden right now that's a little weedy or something, you maybe toss some bad old leaves or something back there, whatever, that you clean that up, get it out of there. And if you've had this problem before, keep that in mind. If it's a new problem, maybe be a little bit proactive.
And if you're uncertain, you can certainly take an image, a photograph with your mobile device and send it to gardentalkradio@gmail.com. That's how you can get a hold of us, and we can help identify the problem because we want you to be successful. We're here to help you, and if we can't diagnose the imagery because we may not know it, we've got other people in the chain of command that have experience that we can say, hey, you've been around a couple more years than we have. What do you think this is? And we can always get you help with your situation.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.